Hey there, and welcome to True Scary Stories. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us where you're from and what time you're watching. That helps YouTube know you love creepy stories, and it'll keep sending more your way.
Hey everyone. Before we get started, I just want to say, if you've ever driven alone on a long stretch of highway late at night, you know that feeling, that unsettling silence, the darkness pressing in on all sides, the way your headlights only reach so far before the road just disappears into nothing. Most of the time, nothing happens. You make it home safe. But sometimes something goes wrong, and when it does, you're miles from help. Miles from anyone who can hear you scream. Tonight, I've got 3 stories for you. 3 real experiences from people who were just trying to get from point A to point B. People who had no idea that the highway they were driving on would become the setting for the worst night of their lives. So turn off your lights, get comfortable, and whatever you do, try not to think about the next time you'll be driving alone at night. Let's begin. Story 1. The Hitchhiker. This first story comes from a guy named Marcus. Back in 2019, Marcus was driving from Phoenix to Albuquerque for a job interview. It was a route he'd never taken before, and he decided to leave at night to avoid the desert heat. Big mistake. Around 2 a.m., Marcus was about halfway through his drive. He was on a particularly desolate stretch of I-40, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Arizona. No gas stations, no rest stops, just endless asphalt cutting through the dark desert landscape. The radio had gone to static about 20 miles back, so Marcus was driving in complete silence, just the hum of his engine and the occasional gust of wind rocking his car. He remembers feeling incredibly alone out there, like he was the only person left in the world. That's when he saw him. Standing on the side of the road, illuminated by Marcus's headlights, was a man. He was wearing jeans and a dark hoodie, and his thumb was out hitchhiking. But here's the thing that immediately struck Marcus as wrong. The man had no luggage, no backpack, no bag, nothing. Just standing there in the middle of the desert at 2 a.m. with his thumb out. Marcus's first instinct was to keep driving. Every fiber of his being was screaming at him that something was off. But as he got closer, he could see the man's face more clearly. The guy looked desperate, scared even. His eyes were wide, and he was waving frantically now, not just holding his thumb out. Against his better judgment, Marcus slowed down. He told himself he'd just crack the window, ask if the guy was okay, maybe call for help if he needed it. He wouldn't actually let him in the car. Marcus pulled over about 20 feet past the hitchhiker. He watched in his rearview mirror as the man started jogging toward his car. That's when Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. The man's feet weren't touching the ground. Not like he was floating or anything supernatural like that, but his feet were moving, taking steps, but there was no sound, no crunch of gravel, no footsteps, nothing. It was like watching a video with the sound turned off. Marcus's heart started pounding. He put his car in drive, ready to take off, but before he could hit the gas, the man was at his window, tapping on the glass. "Please," the man said, and Marcus could hear him perfectly despite the closed window. His voice sounded wrong, too deep, too hollow. "Please, I just need a ride to the next town. Please." Marcus looked at the man's face. His skin was too pale, almost gray, and his eyes, his eyes were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just solid black like a shark's eyes. "I can't," Marcus stammered, even though every instinct was telling him not to engage. "I'm sorry, I can't." The man's expression didn't change. He just kept staring with those dead black eyes. "Please," he said again, and this time he started pulling on the door handle. It was locked, but the man was pulling hard, really hard. The whole car was rocking with the force of it. That snapped Marcus out of his frozen state. He slammed his foot on the gas, and his tires squealed as he peeled out, throwing gravel everywhere. He didn't look back. He dared not. But as he accelerated down the highway, going way too fast, he could have sworn he heard something. A voice carried on the wind, even though his windows were up. Marcus drove straight through to Albuquerque without stopping. He didn't stop for gas, even though he was running on fumes by the end. He didn't stop for food or water or to use the bathroom. He just drove, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. When he finally pulled into Albuquerque as the sun was coming up, he immediately went to a police station and told them what he'd seen. The officer who took his statement looked at him with this weird expression, like he'd heard this before. "Sir," the officer said slowly, "you're not the first person to report seeing someone matching that description on that stretch of highway. Over the past 5 years, we've had maybe a dozen reports, always the same spot, always between 1 and 3 a.m., always a man in a dark hoodie trying to hitchhike." Marcus felt his stomach drop. What is it? Who is it?" The officer shook his head. "We don't know. We've sent units out there countless times. We've never found anyone. But here's the thing that really bothers me, sir. Every single person who's reported seeing this man, every single one, says the same thing you did, that his feet don't make any sound, and that his eyes are completely black." Marcus never drove that route again. In fact, he turned down the job in Albuquerque and stayed in Phoenix. He told me that sometimes, late at night when he's having trouble sleeping, he wonders what would have happened if he'd unlocked that door, if he'd let that thing into his car. "But then I remember those eyes," Marcus said, "and I realize I don't want to know. I really, really don't want to know." Story 2. The Vanishing Mile. This second story was sent to me by a woman named Sarah. She's a long-haul truck driver, been doing it for 15 years. She's driven every major highway in the continental United States, often alone, often at night. She's seen a lot of weird things in her time on the road, but nothing, she says, compares to what happened on Highway 50 in Nevada. If you don't know, Highway 50 through Nevada is often called the loneliest road in America. Miles and miles of nothing but desert and mountain ranges. Sometimes you can drive for an hour without seeing another car. Sarah had driven it dozens of times before, without incident. But in the summer of 2021, something happened that made her seriously consider quitting her job. It was around 11 p.m., and Sarah was hauling a load of electronics from Sacramento to Salt Lake City. She'd been driving for about 6 hours and was starting to feel tired, but she wanted to make it past Ely before stopping for the night. She knew there was a decent truck stop there where she could grab some food and get some sleep. The highway was completely empty, not a single car in either direction. Sarah had her GPS on, showing her exactly where she was, how far until Ely, all of that. According to the GPS, she had about 40 miles to go. Should take maybe 35-40 minutes. That's when things got weird. Sarah noticed her mile markers. Every highway has them, right? Those little green signs that tell you what mile you're at. She was at mile marker 247 when she first started paying attention. A minute passed, then another. She should have reached marker 248 by now. But when the next marker came up in her headlights, it still said 247. "That's weird," Sarah muttered to herself. She figured maybe she'd misread the first one. Easy mistake to make when you're tired. But then she passed another marker, 247. And another, 247. And another, 247. Her GPS still showed her moving. The little blue dot was progressing steadily along the highway, but the mile markers outside were all wrong. They all said 247. Sarah felt a prickle of unease run down her spine. She checked her speedometer. She was going 65 miles per hour, steady. She checked her GPS. Again, still showed her moving toward Ely, now 35 miles away. But those goddamn mile markers kept saying 247. "Okay, this is fucked up," Sarah said out loud. And hearing her own voice in the silence of the cab was somehow worse. It sounded small, scared. She kept driving. What else could she do? But she was gripping the steering wheel tighter now, and her eyes kept darting between the road, the GPS, and the windows, searching for anything that looked off. That's when she noticed the landscape. It was repeating. There was this distinctive rock formation off to her right, about 100 yards from the highway. It was pretty unique. 3 tall rocks clustered together, kind of looked like fingers reaching up out of the desert. Sarah had noticed it earlier, and now she was seeing it again, and again, and again. Every few minutes, that same rock formation would appear in the same position relative to her truck, like she was driving in a loop. But that was impossible. Highway 50 was a straight shot through here. There were no loops, no circles, just a straight line through the desert. Sarah's heart was hammering now. She grabbed her radio, tried to reach out to any other truckers who might be in the area. "Breaker, breaker, this is Sarah. Anyone out there on Highway 50? I'm experiencing some kind of, I don't know, something's wrong. Can anyone hear me?" Static. Just static. She tried her cell phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual out here, but somehow it felt more ominous now. Sarah checked her fuel gauge. She had half a tank when this started. She still had half a tank. She'd been driving for at least 15 minutes in this, whatever this was. She should have burned through at least a few percentage points of fuel, but the needle hadn't moved. "No, no, 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 no," Sarah whispered. She pressed harder on the gas, pushing her truck up to 75, then 80. She needed to break out of this, whatever this was. The mile markers kept saying 247. The rock formation kept appearing. Her GPS showed her moving, but nothing outside was changing. And then she saw lights. Headlights coming up behind her. Fast. Relief flooded through Sarah. Another car, another person. She wasn't alone. She watched in her side mirror as the headlights got closer and closer. They were coming up really fast, too fast. The vehicle pulled into the left lane to pass her, and Sarah turned to look, wanting to see who it was, maybe try to flag them down. It was a truck. Exactly like hers. Same model, same color, same company logo on the side. And behind the wheel, illuminated by the dashboard lights, was her. Sarah saw herself driving the other truck. Same tired expression, same white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, same look of growing terror. The other truck passed her and disappeared into the darkness ahead. Sarah's mind was reeling. What the hell was happening? Was she hallucinating? Had she fallen asleep at the wheel and was actually dreaming this? She pinched herself. Hard. It hurt. She was awake. The mile marker ahead came into view. 247. Sarah made a decision. She slammed on the brakes, bringing her truck to a complete stop right there in the middle of the highway. She put it in park and just sat there, breathing hard, trying to figure out what to do. The desert around her was completely still. No wind, no sound, nothing. And then from somewhere far off in the darkness, she heard an engine, getting closer. She looked in her rearview mirror and saw headlights approaching from behind. It was her truck again, heading straight for her. "Fuck this," Sarah said. She threw her truck back in drive and floored it. She didn't care about the mile markers anymore. She didn't care about the repeating landscape. She just drove as fast as her truck would go, pushing it to 85, 90 miles per hour. And then, suddenly, everything snapped back to normal. The mile marker ahead said 248. The rock formation was gone, replaced with different terrain. Her GPS flickered, recalculated, and showed her exactly where she had been all along. 33 miles to Ely. Sarah's radio crackled to life with chatter from other truckers. Her cell phone showed 2 bars of signal. She eased off the gas, her hands shaking so badly she could barely keep the truck steady. She checked her clock. According to the timestamp, only 5 minutes had passed since she had first noticed the repeating mile markers. 5 minutes. But it had felt like at least half an hour. Sarah pulled into the truck stop in Ely and didn't leave for 2 days. She couldn't bring herself to get back on that highway. When she finally did continue her route, it was during daylight, and she took a completely different road, adding 3 hours to her trip. She never drove Highway 50 at night again. I don't know what happened to me out there. I don't know if it was some kind of magnetic anomaly or psychological break or something else. But I know what I saw. I know what I experienced. And I know that somewhere out there on that highway, there's a stretch of road that doesn't play by the rules. A mile that doesn't end. And God help anyone who gets stuck there longer than I did.
Story 3, The Rest Stop. This last story comes from a guy named Jason, and it's probably the most disturbing one I've heard in a long time. It happened in the winter of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, which makes the isolation aspect even worse. Jason was driving from Denver to his parents' place in Omaha for Christmas. He'd been working from home for months due to COVID and was desperate to see his family. The drive was supposed to take about 8 hours, but Jason decided to leave at night to avoid traffic and get there early the next morning. Around 3 a.m., Jason was somewhere on I-80 in western Nebraska. He'd been driving for about 5 hours and needed to stop to use the bathroom and stretch his legs. He was also getting low on gas, so he started looking for a rest stop or gas station. The thing is, this part of Nebraska is pretty sparse. Not a lot of towns, not a lot of services. Jason drove for about 20 minutes without seeing any exits, and he was starting to get worried. He really needed to use the bathroom, and his fuel light had just come on. Finally, he saw a sign, Rest Area, 2 miles. Jason felt a wave of relief. He took the exit, following the road as it curved away from the highway and into what looked like a small wooded area. That struck him as a little odd. Nebraska isn't exactly known for its forests, but he was too focused on his bladder to think much about it. The rest stop appeared out of the darkness. It was one of those old-style facilities, a small brick building with restrooms, some vending machines visible through a window, and a parking lot with space for maybe 10 cars. There was a single streetlight illuminating the area, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. Jason's was the only car there. He pulled into a spot near the building and turned off his engine. The silence was immediate and absolute. No traffic noise from the highway, even though it couldn't have been more than a quarter mile away. No wind, no insects, nothing. Jason sat in his car for a moment, and that's when he noticed something. The rest stop looked old, really old. The brick was crumbling in places, and the paint on the doors was peeling. Weeds were growing up through cracks in the parking lot. The whole place had this abandoned feeling to it. But the lights were on inside. He could see them through the windows, and the street light was working. Weird, Jason muttered. He grabbed his phone, thinking he'd be quick. Get in, use the bathroom, get out. 5 minutes max. He approached the building, and his footsteps seemed way too loud in the silence. The door was one of those heavy metal ones, and when he pulled it open, it let out a long, rusty creak that made him wince. The interior was exactly what you'd expect from a rest stop bathroom. Tile floor, a few stalls, sinks, hand dryers, fluorescent lights humming overhead, but there was a smell. Not the usual bathroom smell. Something else. Something sweet and rotten, like meat that had been left out too long. Jason's unease was growing, but his need to pee was stronger, so he went into one of the stalls, did his business, trying to breathe through his mouth to avoid the smell. That's when he heard the door open. Footsteps on the tile floor, slow, deliberate. They stopped right outside his stall. "Hello," Jason called out. His voice sounded weak, nervous. No response. But the footsteps started again, moving away from his stall toward the sinks. Jason finished up and flushed. He opened the stall door slowly, peeking out. There was a man standing at the sinks. His back was to Jason. He was wearing a dark jacket and jeans, and he was just standing there, not washing his hands, not doing anything, just standing there facing the mirror. "Hey," Jason said, trying to sound casual. "Didn't realize anyone else was here." The man didn't move, didn't acknowledge him at all. Jason's instincts were screaming at him now. Something was very, very wrong. He started moving toward the exit, keeping his eyes on the man, not turning his back on him. That's when the man spoke. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was weird, flat, no emotion, and he still hadn't turned around. "Yeah, I'm just leaving," Jason said, walking faster now. "You shouldn't be here," the man said again, and this time his voice was louder, angrier. "You shouldn't be here. This place isn't for you." Jason reached the door and pushed through it, practically running back to his car. He fumbled with his keys, dropped them, picked them up, finally got the door unlocked. He threw himself inside and locked the doors, starting the engine with shaking hands. He looked back at the rest stop building. The man was standing in the doorway, just standing there, watching. And even from this distance, even in the poor light, Jason could tell something was wrong with the man's face. It was too pale, and his eyes, they were reflecting the light, like an animal's eyes. Jason threw his car into reverse and peeled out of the parking lot. He didn't care about gas anymore. He'd risk running out before he stayed there another second. As he accelerated back toward the highway, he glanced in his rearview mirror. The rest stop was still visible, that lone street light in the darkness, and he could see the man, still standing in the doorway, still watching. But here's where it gets really fucked up. Jason reached the highway and got back on I-80 heading east. His heart was still pounding, but at least he was back on a main road. He'd find another place to stop, a gas station in a town, somewhere with people. He drove for about 5 minutes and then he saw another sign. Rest area, 2 miles. "No," Jason said out loud. "No, no, 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 no." But the exit appeared again, and against all logic, against all his instincts telling him not to, Jason took it. He had to know. The road curved away from the highway into a small wooded area, and there it was. The same rest stop, the same brick building, the same yellow street light, the same parking lot. And the same man still standing in the doorway. Jason didn't stop this time. He didn't even slow down. He drove right past the rest stop and tried to find a way back to the highway. But the road didn't loop back. It just ended. Just stopped. Turned into dirt and grass and nothing. He threw his car into reverse, turned around, and drove back past the rest stop. The man was walking toward his car now, slowly, deliberately. Jason found the exit back to the highway and floored it. He merged onto I-80 going way too fast, almost losing control of his car. He didn't care. He just needed to get away. He drove for another 10 minutes and then... Rest area, 2 miles. "No," Jason said out loud. "No, no, 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 no." But the exit appeared again and again, every 10 minutes, the same rest stop. The same sign. Sometimes he'd pass it without exiting. Sometimes he'd see it from the highway, that lone streetlight in the darkness, and every single time the man was there. Sometimes in the doorway, sometimes standing by the road. Once he saw him standing right at the edge of the highway, watching the cars pass. Jason called 911. The operator answered, but when Jason tried to explain what was happening, the call dropped. He tried again, same thing. He tried calling his parents, his girlfriend, anyone. Every call dropped within seconds. This went on for what felt like hours. Jason, driving, seeing the rest stop appear over and over, unable to get away from it. He was crying now, sobbing, convinced he was losing his mind. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The next exit Jason saw was for Lexington, a real town with gas stations and restaurants. He pulled off immediately, filled up his tank, and sat in the gas station parking lot as the sun came up. He was shaking so badly he could barely hold his coffee cup. Jason called his parents and told them he wasn't coming. He couldn't drive anymore. He got a hotel room in Lexington and stayed there for 3 days trying to process what had happened. Eventually, he drove back to Denver, taking a completely different route. He never drove on I-80 through Nebraska again. But here's the thing that still haunts him. Last year, Jason was scrolling through a news article about missing persons along I-80. There was a picture of a rest stop where several people had last been seen before disappearing. Jason recognized it immediately. The same brick building, the same parking lot, the same yellow streetlight. The article mentioned that the rest stop had been closed in 1987 after reports of suspicious activity. It was supposed to have been demolished in the early 1990s. But Jason knows it's still there, somewhere along that highway, waiting for the next person who's tired and desperate enough to stop. I don't know if I was stuck in some kind of loop or if that place, if it doesn't exist in the same way normal places do, but I know what I experienced, and I know that man wanted me to stay. He wanted me to become part of whatever that place is, and sometimes, late at night, I wonder if some part of me is still there, still driving that same stretch of highway, still seeing that rest stop appear over and over, still trying to get away.
So there you have it. 3 stories from 3 different highways. 3 people who were just trying to get home, who had no idea that the road they were on was about to become a nightmare. The thing about highways is that they're liminal spaces, right? You're not at home. You're not at your destination. You're in between. And maybe, just maybe, there are places along those roads where the rules are different, where reality gets thin, where things can slip through. I don't know. All I know is that after hearing these stories, I've started paying a lot more attention when I'm driving at night. I watch the mile markers more carefully. I think twice before stopping at a rest area that looks too empty. And when I see a hitchhiker on the side of the road, I don't slow down. Not anymore. Stay safe out there, everyone. Keep your doors locked. Keep your eyes on the road. And if something feels wrong, if you see something that doesn't make sense, trust your instincts. Get out of there. Because sometimes the fastest way home is to keep driving and never look back. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.